Hey everybody, we're doing a Chapter 7 review for the final. Chapter 7's probably the fullest section that we had, or chapter we had, because there's a lot of the material in this chapter. We've done all the exponent laws. Those are important, but the last part on polynomials are very important. And there's just a couple of things that you need to be good at with the polynomials. First is adding and subtracting polynomials, and then, well, let's just get that down. How do you add or subtract polynomials? It all boils down to one thing. You have to have like terms. Like terms is a fancy word, and it just basically says the terms have the exact same variable factors. Well, it's having a hard time focusing there. There it came in. Examples. 5xy squared and -7. Okay, are those like terms? No, they're not like. Because this one has two factors of y, this one only has one. This has one factor of x, and this one has two factors of x. They're not exactly the same. So we can strike that one out. We can't really do anything to simplify those terms. What about 5xy squared plus, I didn't want to do plus. (5xy squared minus 7xy squared). Yes, these are exactly the same. Yes, these are like. And there's this thing, when you have like terms, they simplify. So if you have like terms, then you can simplify. And you just simplify by combining or adding and subtracting the coefficients. Add, subtract the coefficients. Now notice I'm not saying anything about the exponents, because exponents has to do with multiplying. But adding and subtracting is just going to affect how many of these factors we have. We have 5 of these xy squareds. And we're going to take away 7 of these xy squareds, so this does simplify to minus 2 xy squareds. Notice the only thing that changed was the coefficient. So for adding and subtracting, you're changing the coefficients. That's all that gets changed in the short and sweet of it all. Okay, so that's a big theme in Chapter 7, to get really good at adding and subtracting polynomials. The other big theme is multiplication. Now multiplication, that's why we had to learn all the exponent laws. So essentially, multiplication is going to involve a couple of things here. I'm going to move that down. You're going to need A, your exponent laws. And B, you're going to need the distributive property. That's when you take something and multiply it times a group. Use the distributive law to, you do the arrows. You don't have to do the arrows, but as long as you multiply this one thing times the whole group, you get A times B. plus you multiply this one thing times everything in the group, including the c. So you got a times c. So we're going to combine these two things together to do all kinds of multiplying. There's a few shortcuts to the multiplying as well, but some examples might look like, oh, there's also some vocabulary. Let's see here. Do I want to make a big deal about the vocabulary? Hopefully it's not necessary. Hopefully you know what I'm talking about. With the polynomials, there are things called monomials. And that just equals one term. There's binomials, obviously two, and then trinomials. That's three terms. And then polynomial just means many. So that's what that prefix is referring to. It's a Latin word for many. So a lot of times we just call everything polynomials. But sometimes we call out a few special polynomials by their specific names, monomial, binomial, or trinomial. Okay, so we're going to be talking about multiplying here for a second. Just to throw down a few examples, we might have 7xy squared times 5x squared y. So this is a monomial. It's a one-term expression times another one-term expression, and it's all multiply. These are the easiest kind because it's 100% exponent laws. Well, except for the coefficients. So you can multiply the numbers together and you get 35. You multiply the x's together. And one of our exponent laws that we were studying before is if you have base times the same base, you just add the powers. This is a x to the first power. X squared is x cubed. Same with the y's. Y squared times a y is y cubed. That's an example of multiplying with a monomial. Now you might have a monomial times a binomial. Let's go AW. And in this case, now we're going to use our exponent laws and the distributive laws. So we take this whole term times the first one, and then again times the second one. And so we'll have 7 times 5 again, that's 35, but we're going to have x times x to the fourth, which makes x to the fifth, times more y's. But in this term, there's no more y, so it's going to be x's times y squared. That's all we can do on the first multiply. Then we're going to have minus 7 times 8 is 56. And we're going to have x squared, xy squared w. And that's a monomial times a binomial. And then we have the 9x plus 1, let's say 3x minus 5. This we have to do a double distribution. If this parenthesis wasn't here and we just had this one number, we would have two arrows. 1 times the first one, 1 times the second one. If the 1 wasn't here and we only had the 9, we would do a double distribution, 9x on the first one, 9x on the last one. But we have a group of 2 times a group of 2. Now there's a couple of ways to approach it, but our main way was something we called the FOIL. The FOIL, excuse me, the FOIL helped us keep track of all the multiplications. We have to do 4 of them. The first term times the first term, that's the F in the FOIL. 9x times 3x is 27x squared. then we're going to do the outer ones. 9 is on the outside edge. 5 is on the outside edge, so we're going to take 9x times 5, and we'll get negative 45x. That was the outer edge multiply. Now we're going to do the inner term multiply. 1 is on the inner side of this one. 3x is on the inner side of that one. We'll multiply that. That's our inner multiplication. And we get a positive 3x. And then we have our last multiplication. 1 is the last one in this group. Negative 5 is the last in that group. Oops. So we want to do the last multiplies there. And so we're going to have 1 times negative 5 is negative 5. So that's just a quick refresher on multiplying polynomials. And we can simplify, but that takes us back to adding and subtracting. So after we did all the multiplying, do we have anything we can add and subtract? And we sure do, because this is second power. This is first power and first power. Second power doesn't have anything like, but these two do. They are like terms. So I can simplify to 27x squared. Negative 45x plus 3x is minus 42x minus 5. There's the simplified answer for that multiplication. And now we're going to practice a little bit more here in a minute. But the main thing is to be able to multiply polynomials in lots of various forms. There's a couple of shortcuts, but if you're not good on the shortcuts, you can always multiply a group times a group with the FOIL method. Lastly is something that we didn't do a whole lot, and that's to evaluate a polynomial. For example, let's say we've got 7xy squared minus 9x. There's a polynomial. And we want to evaluate this for x equals negative 2 and y equals 3. Okay, so I hope that's kind of obvious to you, but evaluating a polynomial is as simple as plugging in. So I'm going to do the 7. Notice how I took the x out and gave myself a parentheses to hold the place for whatever the number is. I took the y out and gave myself parentheses for whatever the y is. I'm going to do the same thing with the second term. So the x's are negative 2, so I got to plug in a negative 2 here and a negative 2 here. The y's, there's only one y term, it's right here. I'm going to plug in the 3, and that's what it means to evaluate the polynomial. So it's just a matter now of maybe doing some math or your calculator here. This is 7 times 2 equals negative 14 times 9 minus a negative 9 times a negative 2 will be positive 18, and then we've got to multiply times 9. So 14 times 9, we're going to get negative 126. And then we're going to add 18. And so we get negative 108. That's the value of this polynomial when we plug in. That's what it means to evaluate. All right, we're going to do a little bit more practice here. So now what I'm going to do is just give you some problems where you practice them, and I'll work them out so you can check your work. So that's coming up here in just a second.